The organization is calling for rewrites to be ordered in those schools where the investigation task team had definite evidence that pupils had been in possession of the paper. NAPTOSA's Executive Director Basil Manuel joins us now to talk about this. Basil, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. It looks to me that the report presented to Umalusi by the Department of Basic Education says we can't determine who saw the paper and who didn't. Yet you've got sight that the preliminary investigation shows that not all students, but a handful, at least below 200, had access to the paper. What do you make of that disconnect?
Absolutely. Look, what has been presented to us shows 195 learners. That's under 200. And of course, it is also added that the investigation is not completed. Now, when we start basing a major decision like this on vague assumptions, saying because of the impact of social media, it may have spread beyond. Now, when we talk about ifs and maybes, in a year like 2020, where our learners have become very delicate, they have been through many stresses and strains. To add this to it, I think is overkill, and it's tantamount to being irresponsible.
Malusi says the particular integrity of the paper is irrevocably compromised. That's a strong word. I mean, would you agree with that sentiment?
What I agree with is the concerns of Umalusi. I don't think they wrongly placed. I think we should be worried about the integrity of the exam. However, the litmus test lies in what constitutes irrevocable damage. 200 out of almost 400,000 children? I think there's a serious disconnect there, and I think it's a serious overreaction. Even if we spoke about 500 learners, it still doesn't suggest that we've got to punish 365,000 other learners. That is over the top. Yeah. And this is what we are saying. We are not saying that there mustn't be penalties. Neither are we saying we don't want to get to the truth. But show us that, in fact, this had spread so far and wide that we've got to make this decision at first. Secondly, we are saying punish those learners by all means. At worst, the schools from which they come from. We are not saying automatically the schools. We are saying at worst, because we know there will always be innocents that will be punished, but we can't punish the entire country. And I stress again, I don't think we've considered the year we are in. So before we jump to those conclusions and make those firm decisions, we need to be very rational about this. Yeah. And I am committing myself to saying, I don't believe we've looked at all angles. Now, it's a knee-jerk reaction, and it's an overplay.
I suppose when Umalusi hears the words that it is impossible to determine how many learners had access to the paper, in fact, even if we are to conduct this interview, these investigations until February, we are not going to be able to determine how far the extent of the leak has actually gone. I mean, they are left with very few options there.
I don't think so. At first, remember we have marking centers, and we're going to be marking in those marking centers. Yeah. And it is in marking that you can also determine whether a certain amount of copying has happened, whether things have been given. And with the evidence you already have, that gives you the basis of saying, we know for sure that that question landed up on a WhatsApp page. We know that those questions are there, and you look out for those, and you look to the exactness of a response. Yeah. There are ways and means to do this. It's not just as simple as saying, let them rewrite, because we have difficulty investigating. You know, we've been investigating for quite a long time already. So it is actually a great pity that we haven't sped this up. I am unhappy with the quality of the investigation.
Yeah. So the argument that says, well, the reason why we are not, because I put that to Malusi, but you've got investigative marking. It's a tool that is at your disposal. Why go for the severe national rewrite? And he says, well, the problem is that it's because this leak has happened in all provinces. That's the answer.
Yes, but to what extent? You see, it's very true to say, and as has been proven already with the physics paper, where children were already in the exam room when the date and time stamp showed that papers were sent to them. Now, do you call that part of the leak? The investigation will determine whether those who received it in good time so that it had an impact, but also we've got to show that whilst it may have reached little pockets in every province, we cannot claim that it reached the entire country. That is not true.
Yeah. It seems, I mean, we know SACTU is putting court papers together by tomorrow to file those for an urgent interdict of this decision. I don't know whether you will be supporting that as NAPTOSA, but from the Department of Basic Education side, they're not seeing any prospect of success of this case because they're saying once Malusi has made the decision that they will not sign on the results, well, it's pretty much game over. There's nothing else anybody can do.
But that is why the DBE has to put up a strong case for Umalusi to be convinced that, in fact, the compromise is not so great. Yes, and we do support the many groups that are going to court because we believe that there's a credible chance of success. And of course, they've got to talk it down because that is exactly what somebody does who is in opposition to any move. And of course, got to be dismissive of it as though it won't stand a chance of success. But we believe that logic must play a part and empathy as well, because this is the bottom line.
Yeah.
We are not considering the times we are in.
Malusi says we must not be negative, Basil. We must look at this in a positive way. He says this is an opportunity, actually, for the students who might have not done well in geometry or whatever arithmetics or algebra, I beg your pardon, and they get to rewrite and actually do better.
I can only shake my head in awe and wonder who has looked at these students. Have you seen what the students are looking like in the schools? Have you seen how stressed they are? There are people who will be writing the day before this and writing other papers. There are those students who have to pick up CAT. Those are the students who could not save their papers, etc., etc. The mop up, they've got to do it the day thereafter. Do you know how much stress and strain there is? I don't believe this is in favor of learners. That is now a serious misjudgment.
Yeah. I suppose the broader conversation then, Basil, that we need to have is about the Department of Basic Education having dealings with people who lack integrity and honesty, who don't see how messed up this thing is of leaking exam papers and how you could destroy young people and the livelihoods of young people and this whole entire education system.
Absolutely. Look, we've got to plug the holes, but let's not be unfair too. I'm on record as saying, and I want to repeat it, our exam section has done exceedingly well over a number of years, where this type of drama hasn't really occurred to the extent it has. However, now suddenly we find these gaps. Is it desperation? Is it just criminality? And I'm glad to hear somebody has been arrested, but that is not the only person. So I agree we need to step up the process, to look at our systems and change our systems if necessary. But let's not create the impression that the department has been a wholesale failure when it comes to the exam, because it's not true.
Basil, appreciate your time and thank you for joining us tonight. Basil Manuel, they're speaking for NAPTOSA, of course, joining a large chorus of many who are saying this is unfair and premature. However, Malusi standing firm tonight, saying they are, of course, feeling that the integrity of these exams has been irrevocably compromised.